even the earliest music that I listened to, when I was talking earlier about, Aretha Franklin and Creedence Clearwater, stuff like that, that my mom was into, I think that I subconsciously recognized that there was a difference between that and when I bought Vanilla Ice's tape and I listened to that. I was like, I enjoyed Vanilla Ice as a young child, and I was like, oh, this is fun. But then when I would listen to Creedence Clearwater, I'm like, even granted the music is way different, but I could recognize there was a different thing there. And then I think for me, I had always kind of been, if I'm fast forwarding to like, when I really came into my, at the time, artistic tastes, like late middle school, early high school, I was drawn toward anything that felt raw. I was into, I started to get into heavy music. I really liked, Napalm Death and Fear Factory, Earth Crisis, stuff like that. And then I was also I started getting really into horror movies, and it was a very similar thing. I would watch these, late 70s to late 80s horror movies, and they were, most of them were pretty low budget, and they were, a lot of them were campy, but there was just something about it that felt like gritty and it just felt raw. And I realized later on that kind of permeated my music taste and my art taste in general. I've always been super into like, pop music and stuff like that. I love a good summer blockbuster as much as the next guy, but there's just something else that there's another gear that gets kicked in when I hear something or I watch something, and it's just like, for lack of a better phrase, it just gives me that stank face of just like, ooh, like that's awesome. Whether it's a shot in a film or a riff or a vocal take of some sort, where even, what's funny is my daughter, my oldest, she's 14, and she really likes Olivia Rodrigo. And there's this song that she has that it's just a straightforward pop song. It's called Driver's License. But when I listen to it, I'm just like, that just feels like it's a teenager writing it, and it's teenage topics and teenage feelings, but I know that those feelings are so there. And it does the same thing to me that, watching The Exorcist did when I was younger, or totally random, but there's this new band called Johnny Booth that I just discovered, and it's a very similar thing there, where I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I believe it, and I think the believing it thing is what is paramount. Again, whether it's, I feel like you can tell when something is created as a product to be sold, as opposed to a vision that just has to come out. I feel like you can see that in film, you can hear it in music. I don't like speaking negative about any sort of art, but there are particular types of movies that I'll go and see, and I'm just like, okay, you're attempting to check all the boxes to make as many people happy as possible. And you're doing it, and I enjoy it, but I see what this is. It's a product. Same thing with music. There's music that I listen to, and I'm like, it's not even necessarily pop music, but there's music where I'm like, I see what you're doing. It's enjoyable, but it's a product. And then there's other stuff that's like, movies, like I remember the first time I saw Hereditary, where I was just like, good Lord, like,
yeah,
this is just that. it just feels, like, that it's a real thing. And like, I just saw Talk to Me, a very similar feeling where I'm like,
I was going to ask you about Talk to Me.
Yeah. And like but I can't even put my finger on it, but I know that it's real. I know that the people who wrote it, I know that the people who directed it, the DP, the actors, everybody was like, I believe it. And I think that is over my life. I think that has been the through line to the stuff that really connects is like, oh, I believe what you are doing there.
For sure. And just on Talk to Me as well, I had this experience watching that. I've seen it a few times now, but not only is it so authentically Australian, which resonated as soon as it started, I was like, I understand exactly where this is taking place. Like the sense of setting was just, but also the lead actress went to school with a close friend of mine, and I recognized the directors from YouTube back in the day. And as soon as that movie starts, it's this tracking shot through a house party. And I was like, I've been to 50 of these house parties. This resonates as so true. And it's the same, you mentioned Hereditary, that it is rooted in such a deep germ of reality that you can throw all the exploitation and genre icing on top of it that you want. But
yeah, and I think that the realness, like, if you want to compare those films, it's like, Hereditary felt extremely real in the way that it dealt with grief and all that, and the family dynamic, and that, like the argument at the dinner table and all that stuff, aside from the horror aspects of it, that just felt extremely real. And then on the other end, you have Talk to Me, where the interactions of the characters and the way that they talk to each other, and, you could just tell that, oh, this, these words are coming from conversations that have been had by whoever wrote this 100 times, and that first scene when there's that tracking shot through the house, and then no spoilers, but the way that scene ends, immediately I was like, okay, like, that's all right, now we're doing it, because it's so startling that. And it's so real. Like, it's not done in like a horror movie way. It's just, oh, this is a thing that happened, and I thought it was great.
Yeah. And that movie comes from, I don't know if you heard this story, but one of the writer directors was talking about a memory that he had being at a house party in high school, and thankfully the kid survived, but overdosed, and everyone stood around filming and laughing. And for him, that was the thing that stuck with him, and 10, 15 years later became this film that he wrote and co-directed with his brother. It just, again, speaks to, it comes from that deep, instantly recognizable thing of, this is real.
And also, I don't want to give anything away, but the way that the characters, there's a montage sequence, I'll say. Yeah. You know what montage sequence I'm speaking of.
I do.
The characters in the film are, I guess I would say, just a different generation than what I grew up in. But during that montage sequence, I was like, I've never seen this subject dealt with in this manner. Like the tone of it and everything that's going on. But at the same time, I was like, I could see this happening now. I could see these people reacting in this way. And even though it's not how I would react during this thing that's happening, I could see a video being posted online of it happening and me being like, what the heck are these kids doing? Like, are they crazy? And that, I think, is why, even though I can't relate to it, it still feels real, because I'm like, this, I could see this happening, and I think that's so, I think on paper it sounds crazy, but the way they were able to pull it off, I believed it immediately. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just admiring your collection of masks. For people that are watching that, they'll be able to see in the background.
Oh, thanks.
Up on your
I have more, but I don't have a ton of shelf space. But yeah, I like masks a lot. I've got a couple, like when if there's a movie that I work on that has a mask in it, I always try to sweet talk the director into giving it to me. So there's a couple up there that were for movies that I worked on, and then there's this one right here is a remake of the 2003 Texas Chainsaw film when he takes the boyfriend's face off. That's a remake of that, and then this is it's a Jeepers Creepers mask, and then a couple different ones. I nerd out on that stuff. I like it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And tell me about that transition and maybe where this started for you into the world of scores and working in film. I'm so curious because for me, that's something I've always wanted to. It's one of the many things that has been on my bucket list of I'd love to work in film, whether it's in script writing or in scoring. So for you, how did that start and what was that pathway like?
Yeah, I was, in the same spot, but I viewed scoring films a lot of the way that I viewed being in a band when I was growing up. I was like, oh, well, that's other people do that. Like, I don't do that. And I remember very vividly, we were on tour. I think it was 2008, when there's a movie called Sunshine that Danny Boyle directed. And I saw it. We had a day off on tour, and there was we all went to the movies, and I didn't know anything about it. I just knew that the guy that directed 28 Days Later was directing a space movie, and I was like, "Oh, I'm there. I'm gonna go see that."
Yeah.
And everybody else wanted to go see Hot Rod, and I was like, "I don't want to go see that." So me and the merch guy for the band that we were on tour with went and saw Sunshine, and I walked out of that with that score in my head, and I was like, I want to do that. Like the thing that guy's doing, that's what I want to do. But it was one of those things that was just bouncing around in my head for years after that. I never took any concrete steps to make it happen. It was more just like, oh, that would be cool to do one day. And then one night, I was laying in bed watching something with my wife. I forget what it was, but I had made, a comment for the umpteenth time to her. I'm like, oh, the score for that thing is so good. Man, I'd love to do that one day. And, she's a very wise woman. And she was like, why are you not why are you not doing this? Like, why are you not even trying to do this? Like, you keep talking about wanting to do it and you're just not doing it. And then I gave her all the, all the reasons why. I was like, I don't know how. I don't know how to get started. I don't have connections. I can't read music. I wouldn't even know where to start. And she's like, well, why don't you just say that you're doing it and then, see what happens from there, it's kind of like, jumping off the cliff and then, sewing the parachute on the way down sort of thing. So I did, what I did is I posted a thing online saying that I had phrased it as I was opening my studio up to writing projects. So if anybody had a video game or an album or a film or anything they wanted me to write on, to contact me, and I was opening up my studio for that. And I only phrased it that way because I didn't feel comfortable saying that I was scoring film because I'd never done it before. But I was just hoping that a director or a producer would reach out and say, hey, would you want to write music for this thing? And I had a friend, luckily for me, he had moved out to LA to become an actor. And he decided he was going to direct a short film, and he hit me up and he was like, hey, I don't have any money for this thing. Like, it's a no budget thing, but would you want to write music for it? And I was like, absolutely. So he sent me that, and I ended up scoring that. And, from that point on, it was really a snowball of, one, just a ton of learning, having to learn an insane amount in a short period of time. But also it would be like, okay, a producer that I worked with on this thing was working on this other project, and he's like, oh, I know a composer that would be good for this, or, an actor that was working with the director, and then was like, hey, like I worked, this guy did the last film that I did, like maybe blah, blah, blah. And it was so, kind of a snowball from there. And that was back in, I started, I made that jump and posted that thing back in 2017. And I'm still doing it. I'm working on I think this is it's my fifth or sixth feature currently, and then I have two lined up right after this one. So I'm just continuing to learn. Thankfully, continuing to get films, which is crazy. Like my whole thing is like if I could score one movie, that would be awesome. And I'm just still doing it. And it's like with any creative career endeavor, there's ups and downs, and because it's not as if it's, I enjoy doing it, but at the same time it's it's something that I want to be able to do as a career long after I'm able to play in the band. Because I could see myself being elderly and doing this, so I'm navigating the business of it and all that, which is never fun, but it's wild, man. Like I feel like I've kind of hit the life lottery multiple times, with the band, and then being able to do this, and on top of family and everything else. So it's pretty rad.